Thanks, Sunil, and thanks for the organizers for inviting me. It's actually a real thrill to be introduced by Dr. Sharma, who's an undisputed leader in the field of novel drug discovery. So I'm going to take the time here, and I'm going to just talk briefly about how I ended up here and how the elephants may actually play a role in this new company in the context of innovation and trying to deliver discoveries to patients. And just a quick disclosure, both these companies, I'm proud to say, have gone through the TVC, and we're going to talk a little bit about Peel Therapeutics, and of course, as you heard, now I'm a lover of all things elephant. Now, I am a pediatric oncologist, and what I want to say, and you've heard this from others, is it's really the patients that guide us. And that really, at least for me, is the motivation for what we're doing. And you'll understand, hopefully, in the next 7 or 8 minutes, why my interest in cancer susceptibility actually has led potentially to a new therapeutic for treatment and maybe even one day prevention. So this is Danielle. She was 4 when we first met her. She's actually had 2 cancers, acute lymphoblastic leukemia as well as a brain tumor. Her father died of a brain tumor and her father's brother died of a brain tumor. And she has a cancer susceptibility syndrome known as Li-Fraumeni syndrome. She's missing a gene called P53, which we'll talk about, that normally helps to protect us from cancer. You heard a little bit about unmet clinical needs, and for cancer, just to bring it home, if people could just raise their hands if you know someone or yourself has ever been affected by cancer. Right? So everyone's hand in the room has gone up. So clearly this is a clinical need. At 1.6 million new diagnoses per year, still 600,000 deaths from cancer, and just here in Utah alone, 11,000 new diagnoses per year. Now, P53 was a gene that we were studying in the lab in relationship to these patients with their syndromes. Now, P53, again, called the guardian of the genome. I didn't come up with that name. It's really one of the most important genes that we have protecting us from cancer. Its job is to stop the cell from dividing when it has a precancerous mutation, and then if it can't fix that cell, actually go on and kill that cell. And so when we talk about it with the patients, we describe it as this superhero of the genome, really helping to protect us from cancer. And of course, if we don't have that, like Danielle and her family, then cancer develops. But it also is the most frequently most frequently involved protein or gene involved in cancer itself. In fact, over half of all human tumors are missing P53, which makes sense. If you're a cancer and you want to go on and divide, you get rid of the thing that's stopping you from doing that. And in fact, the other half of all human tumors we're learning actually also involve P53 in some capacity in terms of its regulation. Now, this isn't something new. As Sunil and others know, this has been 30 to 40 years of hope and also undelivered promises. This has really been the holy grail of cancer therapy. Can you imagine if you could target that protein, that gene that's involved in over half of all human tumors? Well, this led us to the elephants, and to really come upon this discovery, we had been focused, like many others in the lab, of who's getting more cancer, which families are getting more cancer, studying even pet dogs, which have an incredibly high rate of cancer, 11 times that of people, and trying to understand why so much cancer. And then we learned that elephants actually almost never get cancer, and the light switch went on. Instead of focusing on who's getting more cancer, what if we looked at who's getting less cancer and try to figure that out? And it turns out that the way that the elephants were being protected from cancer was that instead of having 2 copies of this P53 gene we've been talking about, elephants actually have 40 copies, so 20 times as many, that have over 55 million years of elephant evolution been modified to really help protect the elephants from cancer. And we could talk more about why that is during the break from an evolutionary perspective, but trust me when I tell you it's very important that elephants don't get cancer, otherwise there'd be no such thing as elephants. So what we discovered were that there were these different types of P53, all P53, one very analogous to human, and then 19 others that were different. And Lisa, who's here, Dr. Beglin, in my lab, did some magnificent work, again, published in JAMA, met with a lot of publicity and media about how this is working. And that elephant P53 is very powerful in terms of triggering cell death. So this was all wonderful from a scientific and discovery point of view, and it was certainly very innovative. But then the challenge was, well, how is this going to help people, right? We come back to Danielle, and the reason I went to med school in the first place was to try to figure out how to help people. Well, so here are the elephants. They almost never get cancer, and they have this fantastic cancer protection system that's evolved over 55 million years. So what are we going to do about it? And here I'd like to really highlight that one of the best things in innovation and entrepreneurship is teamwork and who you surround yourself by. And really it was serendipity. I found myself in Israel discussing the elephants, and up to that point I'd always said, well, this is great, but it's almost like science fiction. How are we going to get the elephant protein into you can't do that. It just doesn't exist. But there was a really innovative guy sitting in this meeting in Israel where I was presenting named Avi Schroeder. And Dr. Schroeder is from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. That's like the MIT of Israel, for those who don't know it. And without meeting each other, he heard me discussing the elephants, and what Avi does, what Dr. Schroeder does, is nanoparticle delivery. He actually makes new drug delivery mechanisms. He takes these lipid nanoparticles, less than 1/1000th the size of the human hair, loads them up with new medicines, and gives them to patients. And he's very interested in cancer, and he's previously loaded them up with chemotherapy. And he sat there, and he heard me without meeting me, and he wrote on a piece of paper, need to meet Dr. Schiffman to learn more about the elephant P53 and how we can put that into our nanoparticles. And then I heard him speak, and same thing. I wrote on a piece of paper, I need to meet this guy, Dr. Schroeder, to figure out how do we get our elephant P53 into his nanoparticle. And we began talking just over the break. And the question was, how do we work together between Israel with his technology, with our discovery here in Utah? And we really came to the conclusion that, gosh, academics is phenomenal for making discoveries, as you've heard. But if you want to get this to patients and you only go the academic route, this could take 10, 20, 30 years. And I'll tell you, as a clinical oncologist, one person with cancer is one person too many. So we started talking just initially at first, gee, would there be a way to maybe even commercialize this? And you heard a great talk just before me about how companies are really great about getting things to patients. And just quickly, the nanotechnology, it's, a nanoparticle is very small, like I said, 1/1000th the size of a human hair. And you can load them up with different payloads. And so we discussed doing elephant P53. And what's important to note, this is not a new idea using nanotechnology. There are over 250 drugs on the market. Doxil, Abraxane are two examples of chemotherapies. Multi-billion-dollar industry per year with over millions of men and women treated every day with these compounds. And so I'll tell you how we're moving forward, but first I just want to show you some of the data to explain why we're so motivated and excited. And so the first thing we found was that, and you saw that great quote by Leonardo da Vinci, which I really like, simplicity. So the idea here is half of all tumors are missing P53. Let's just put it back as a protein. And we started doing this in the lab, initially with our transduction and transfection experiments, and we could actually restore that P53 pathway that was missing by re-expressing it. But then we found in the other half of human tumors, we could actually enhance that pathway if it was already there. And just as an example, in the last couple of minutes, I'll show you some images here. On the left is a control of osteosarcoma, no new drug for 40 years. It's a very deadly bone tumor in kids. The cells divide and divide and divide. But if you throw in the elephant P53, then they shrivel and die, and the apoptosis is really starting to work. And so here again, you could see just examples of that going on. So we were pretty excited by what we saw. We found it in lung cancer as well. We found it in prostate cancer. Here's just a pretty dramatic demonstration. On the left, the the cells are control cells. And then on the right, where the elephant P53 turns on, those cells shrivel and die. You can watch it actually explode right before your eyes, these cells. So this was very potent, as it should be, because remember, this took 55 million years to develop. Now, one thing that was pretty excited is we started thinking about how are we going to get this to market and what's our approach, and we could talk about it more during the discussion, but we said we need to go after cancers where there's not much in the way of treatment. So this is GBM, and you can see, again, on the left, the cells sit down on the plate and grow, very deadly brain tumor, and on the right, they really shrivel and die. So I'm going to move through these just in the interest of time, but one thing I'll point out here, we worked with Dr. Whelm at Huntsman. And again, it's all about collaborations. You know, I'm a pediatric oncologist. I have my expertise in genetics, genomics, predisposition, but really reaching out to those in the community who have experience in other types of cancer and other skills. So what I'll say is now we have this nanoparticle actually created out of Israel. So we have a prototype, and it's actually working in our initial studies in a dish. Well, in terms of building that teamwork, we're very fortunate here. You've heard about this innovation ecosystem. I'd add a seventh or eighth mountain there, and I'd stick Dr. Will Deere as his own innovation ecosystem. So Dr. Deere is, you heard, one of our co-directors of the CCTS, but used to be a chief medical officer at Amgen. So he has a lot of experience bringing drugs to market. And he always discusses you need the right target, which is what we feel we have, the right delivery. We believe nanotechnology is the way to go. We have in vitro data, and now we have to get in vivo data. And that really brings us to the last slide, which is, okay, how are we going to do this? And so we formed this company with the help of TVC, only possible with the expertise of TVC, help with patents. We reached out to Ballard Spahr, who you heard has a relationship with TVC, but also helped to get us in all of our paperwork together and help to navigate the licensing process. And so we now have this spin-off company. It's very early. We're beginning our initial funding to do all the things you've just heard about, to actually make sure that we can bring this forward, make sure that it works in mice. It's very promising in vitro, but we need to make sure that the mice survive. We have a strategy to test it in pet dogs, actually, who also get cancer, and then see if we can make an impact. And you know what we like to say when we talk about peel, and again, peel is the Hebrew word for elephant. That's why we chose that word, peel therapeutics, is, you know, big pharma today spends $100 billion, right, on research and development. And if after 3 to 5 years, the most brilliant scientists working in a lab, if they can't get their drug to work, what do? They put it on the shelf. So 3 to 5 years, and they move on to something else. And that's why the cost of drugs are so high, because so few make it out of the pipeline. But by taking this opposite approach of looking at who doesn't get cancer, instead of having 3 to 5 years of research and development, we like to think of it as the elephants have had 55 million years of research and development. And that's really our innovation. And, you know, working together with the university, we have the exclusive license on that IP. So it's a very exciting time. It certainly involves a lot of teamwork and a lot of effort. And I'll stop there and thank you for your attention.